Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Satan and Coffee this Sunday, December 21st of 2025. We are almost out of the year, everybody. We're almost out of the year. It's kind of crazy. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Good to see everybody. So, as we've done, as we will continue to do, and kind of the reason why I'm getting more and more Oracle cards is to do this daily read thing that we're doing. And I'm very excited to use these. These ones are going to be significantly more interpretive than the shadow work ones. So I'm excited to use these cards. Well, I mean, it's an animation, not a photo, but I appreciate it. You can buy it on a T-shirt. So I am working on a website. So I'm working on two websites technically. So adiasdate.com and infernalcompass.com need to be fixed. We'll be doing some work on those after the show. If you go to infernalcompass.com right now, it's kind of embarrassing. Everything's out of proportion. Everything's all over the place. Did you get them yet? Have they been delivered yet, or are you still waiting on them? I think I might end up Dreamweaver, HTML5, CSS3. So do my own PHP in the background, JSON, all that fun stuff. My own SQL databases. So, yeah. Yeah, if I make movies or anything like that, it's Premiere Pro, After Effects, Photoshop, Illustrator, right? So, I just like making my own shit. Like I really do. I will use AI for inspiration. Like if I have an idea in my head and I want to see, like if something can pop up to kind of give me an idea of a direction to go in with certain things, I'll do that. Most of the time, I only use like ChatGPT for grammar and spelling and shit like that with ADHD and dyslexia. It's kind of a pain in the ass. So what I'll do is I'll type up stuff and then I'll just run it through ChatGPT. I literally just tell it, check grammar, check spelling, stuff like that. Which is funny because I will do that and then I will upload what it outputs. It's all my words. It's all my wording, right? I will upload it our outputs, and everybody's like, "You're using fucking ChatGPT." It's like, people would bitch at me. This is the thing. I fucking hate people, right? Because when I would make an abundant amount of spelling mistakes and grammatical errors and things like that, right? People would attack me for the spelling mistakes and the grammar mistakes and think, there's supposed to be a fucking comma here. There's supposed to be a fucking period here, right? And now I have a tool that can take something that I've written and make sure that all of that's correct. And so I use that tool. And now people just bitches like, "Oh, you're using AI." It's like, you know what? Get a fucking life, you fucking loser. Like, really. Like, it is a tool. Right? You want to know what happened when the computer first became a thing? When people started doing work on computers? The people that love typewriters bitched about computers. They said that the computer was, cheating. That the only real way to do it was on the typewriter. So, yeah. Shut the fuck up. You whiny little fucking cucks. Like, oh my God. Fucking people irritate me. Anyway, let's get the read going, shall we? These are oracle cards. I'm not doing reversals. Right. 3-card read. Ooh, I think this fits with today's theme as well. Use a calculator. Real man uses an abacus. Okay, right? Jesus Christ. Fucking morons. So our first card is the Timeless Bloom. So even when things feel their darkest, when things feel their loneliest, when things feel their most empty, we still have power and we still have ability and we still have a direction to grow in. There's a part of your mind that might sit there and say that I can't get through this. I can't get past this. But growth is eternal, even after death. And we're talking about multiple different kinds of death, right? We can be talking about physical death. We can be talking about, ego death. We could be talking about spiritual death, whatever the case may be. The death that we deal with isn't an end, but the opening for a new beginning. And so we have to understand that if in this day, in this time frame, in this period, in this era of our existence, there feels like there are things that are ending, to allow yourself to feel the things that you need to feel, but understand that beyond that death, beyond that ending, is more growth, better growth, something more foundational. And that is followed by the Veil of Despair, which, looking at the Veil of Despair, I love these cards. They're amazing. Wait until you guys see the tarot deck I'm getting. This follows perfectly because with death, with ending, right? Excuse me. With death and ending, there's despair, there's loneliness, there's a hollowness that exists, right? And it is something to work through, it is something to work past. We need to feel the things that we're feeling in order to work through that veil and get to the other side of things, to get to the growth after the ending. And this is merely saying that understand that it is nothing more than a veil. It isn't a wall. It isn't a mountain that is unmovable. It is something that can be worked through. It is only a thin line of today and maybe tomorrow. And then I think this deck is working perfectly for today's topic as well, because our final card is the Sovereign's Oath, the becoming after the ending, right? The ending happens, the despair is felt, the emotions are felt. We go through this, we feel what we need to feel, and we make an oath to self. And that oath is to always be the best and most powerful versions of ourselves, despite what may happen around us. And that is the most difficult part of life, is understanding that in a moment you can be a victim, you can feel hurt, you can feel despair, but to live there is a choice. And the choice must be made for your own sovereignty, to reclaim power and to rebuild. So, these cards are nice. That was my first read with them, guys. You guys got the first read with this deck. And you're wondering what it is the Midnight Oracle. I think these things are just amazing. I love these. And I do think, like, I mean, so I've been getting like a lot of decks recently. So I got the Shadow Work deck, I've got that deck, and I've got a tarot deck on the way, and I'm just like, I'm loving it. I'm loving it. I really, really am. So today's topic, what we're talking about today, right, is interesting. Okay. So there's something that I kind of want to be, I kind of want to, I guess you could say, I want to rant on is what I'm looking for, right? Sorry, so I'm also just looking at, like, I have a few deliveries on the way, and so I'm just trying to figure out when they're going to be showing up. I have a little mini monitor that I'm going to be putting down here to replace my drawing tablet that I'm using as a monitor, and a new rug and like that. So just trying to see when it's going to be. Anyway, what we're talking about, the restoration of the left-hand path. And some of you are probably sitting there going, what the fuck are you talking about? What do you mean? What do you mean the restoration of the left-hand path, Thaddeus? What are you talking about? Why does the left-hand path need a restoration? What happened to it? Well, it's not what happened. It's what's happening to it, right? And so I think to kind of explain this, right, is you don't lose a path by attacking it, right? Like, it's not that it's been attacked or anything like that. You lose it by watering it down, right? That's the thing that's happened with this, okay? And the left-hand path was never about chaos without consequences. It was about sovereignty with teeth, with grit, right? Self-deification, guys. Like that personal power, right? And so what has been happening to the left-hand path is it's been diluted, it's been convoluted, it's been redefined, and, you know, things have been added and things have been removed, and just like anything that exists, I suppose, right? Because it was a loose philosophical system, right? That became so much more than I believe it was ever thought to become. I think the gentleman occultist does a really good job talking about, like, the meaning of it, right? And what it means kind of like in modern occultism. But I'm going to provide kind of like my own synopsis here, right? So what the left-hand path actually is. What is it? So the left-hand path, historically and philosophically, is about self-authorship. You are not discovering a pre-written moral script by submitting to an external cosmology. You are writing yourself through action, consequence, and sustained discipline. This idea aligns directly with existential philosophy. And existentialism is a humanism. Jean-Paul Sartre argues that humans are condemned to freedom, meaning identity is forged through choices, not essence. The LHP takes this further by refusing divine justification entirely. No God authored you, no tradition completes you. You become coherent only through what you consistently enact. So As an example, excuse me, a practitioner who claims sovereignty but cannot regulate sleep, finances, relationships, or addiction is not authoring themselves. They are reacting. Reaction is not authorship. So we have to look into the internal authority over external permission. The LHP rejects permission structures. No priest, guru, deity, or community grants legitimacy. Authorship is internal, but that does not mean imaginary. It must be proven through coherence. In The Undiscovered Self, Carl Jung warns that when internal authority is weak, people unconsciously submit to group identities, ideologies, or archetypes. What looks like rebellion often masks dependency. So an example of this would be someone who says, no one tells me what to do, but collapses under peer pressure, substances, or emotional swings is still externally governed. They just swapped gods for impulses. And that is something that we see a lot of, right? Or at least I do. I mean, I don't know if anybody else is fucking paying attention, but I see a lot of this. And this is probably the primary thing that I'm talking about, where people claim left-hand path, but then immediately follow groupthink, right? They feel like they have to think a certain way in order to fit into this ideal, that this ideal can't exist outside of anything else, right? And you know, it isn't personal to them. It's just something that, like, well, I mean, they feel like they belong because everybody wants to feel like they belong to something, right? And I think that that's the big thing. Everyone wants to belong. Everyone wants to feel connected, to have their tribe, their people, right? Everybody likes to say that. These are my people. But they don't understand that by doing so, you sacrifice the most important part of yourself to those people, simply by phrasing it that way, right? So, power through responsibility, not rebellion. So rebellion is cheap. It really is. Responsibility is costly. And this is why most people will never accept responsibility of anything, because responsibility costs. Real power emerges when a person can carry consequences without outsourcing blame. Again, here's a big thing, right? Is you need to carry the consequences of your actions, accept that responsibility, and not outsource the blame of it. Like, not tell, say, like, it's the government's fault, it's my parents' fault because my mom and my dad didn't love me enough. You know, I didn't get enough fucking hugs as a kid, so that's why I'm a dick. Right? That's outsourcing blame. That idea mirrors classical virtue ethics, right? In Nicomachean ethics, Aristotle frames virtue as cultivated capacity, not belief. You become capable by practicing restraint, consistency, and accountability. The LHP historically valued responsibility because without it, power becomes volatile. Volatility is not danger, it is instability. So again, another example here is a practitioner who invokes transgression but cannot maintain a household, protect dependence, or keep commitments. It's not dangerous. They're unreliable, right? And so why does the LHP historically, like, why is it required discipline? So contrary to modern revisionism, traditional LHP currents demand discipline, not moral purity, but functional control. Tantric and Vamachara traditions required years of preparation before transgressive rites. Western occult LHP figures emphasized will, not indulgence. and even antinomian paths enforced internal limits to prevent psychological fragmentation. Discipline was required because uncontrolled descent leads to possession, not mastery. Jung makes this explicit. Without ego strength, shadow work overwhelms the individual rather than integrating. And then the part that irritates me the most, the myth of no rules equals freedom. No rules is not freedom, it is a lack of structure, which defaults to the strongest impulse in the room. Modern psychology backs this, and Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl, shows that humans need self-chosen meaning and responsibility to remain psychologically intact. Remove obligation, and people do not become free, they become compulsive. So an example would be addiction framed as my will is not will, it is chemistry plus avoidance. So this idea of like, another thing that greatly irritates me with people in the modern left-hand path is this concept of there is no, right? Like I've run into one of these people. Like there's somebody that was, when we were still in England, Dyra and I, there was somebody that hit up her page, very explicitly was flirting with her and stuff like that. And, you know, me being me, I reached out and said, hey, you know, shut the fuck up. And it turned into a fight, right? It turned into this 2-3 day argument. And the person's excuse was, well, you guys say that your left-hand path and, you know, like fucking whoever you want to fuck should be, you know, like, you know, it's what we do, right? We have no rules. And it's like, when I hear people talk like that, I kind of feel sorry for those people, because the thing is people that legitimately think that way about what it is that we do, things like that. They just sound underdeveloped, don't they? They sound lost, right? That's not a good take on the LHP. No, it is not. You know, but unfortunately, there are people out there that, you know, do take it that way. They do take it like in the sense of like, oh, I'm going to do whatever it is that I want to do and whatever I feel like doing, and, you know, consequences be damned. And, you know, that's simply not what it is. That's not what it is. And then, you know, the understanding, the idea that they think that structure for some reason equals, you know, submission or something, right? And here's the thing, structure does not equal submission. Structure answers how not, right? Answers how, not who commands, right? Submission requires an external authority. Structure is self-imposed constraint designed to preserve agency over time. Athletes, artists, and disciplined thinkers all use structure to expand capacity, not reduce it. So an example of this, right? A daily ritual, financial discipline, or, you know, relational boundary does not enslave you. It protects continuity of will. Without continuity, identity fragments. Right? So the idea is to impose limits on yourself, not as submission, because, you know, I mean, I guess the idea of self-authorship, right, is the idea of being submissive only to oneself, I suppose. And, you know, with that being said, then if the idea is to, you know, self-authorship and self-control and all of those things, then you're not being submissive, are you? You're following, you know, something that's guaranteeing that you're going to stay alive long enough to give a shit, right? And it does not matter what they follow. They are looking for something to allow them to do what they want to do. Do not want anything. Do not hide behind anything then. Exactly, Maeve. That's 100%. People are looking for an excuse. They're using the LHP as an excuse. And this is another reason why I say, you know, the restoration of the left-hand path, because there's too many of these people. They're like, it pains me to say this, but there's so many of these people out there, right? And so here's the thing. So the hard truth on this. Freedom without obligation collapses into impulse. Impulse seeks immediate relief. Obligation sustains long-term coherence. Neuroscience supports this. Impulse behavior is driven by limbic reward circuits. Willful behavior requires prefrontal regulation, which strengthens only through repeated responsibility and delayed gratification. If there is no obligation, the nervous system defaults to impulse every time. An impulse is not will. Will is directional, sustained, and costly. Impulse is reactive, short-term, and cheap. Calling impulse my path does not make it sovereign, it makes it unexamined. And so the bottom line with that is the left-hand path is not about doing whatever you want. It's about becoming someone who can choose, hold, and sustain what they want without collapse. That distinction is the spine most people abandon. It's about respecting yourself or anything. But and I completely agree with you, Evil Gaiman. But the problem is when people hear that, right, it's about respecting yourself. Like they think respecting yourself is giving yourself whatever you want. But the thing is sitting there and understanding and taking into consideration, like, okay, I need to, not do this. I need to, hold off on this, instead of just jumping in haphazardly. People abandon that. Right. And it's just, it's really starting to irritate me. And now we're going to talk about, so how did the left-hand path lose that spine? Right. So first and foremost, conflation of shadow work with self-harm. Shadow work was never meant to be an excuse to bleed without containment. In Jungian terms, the shadow is integrated, not indulged. Integration requires ego strength, reflection, and behavioral change. Self-harm, addiction, and reckless behavior are not shadow work. They are possession by the shadow. So the archetypes and the collective unconscious, Carl Jung explicitly warns that engaging unconscious material without structure leads to inflation, fragmentation, and neurosis. Modern left-hand path culture ignored this warning and reframed collapse as courage. So, to give you an example, a practitioner who drinks themselves into dysfunction while calling it embracing the shadow is not integrating anything. They're avoiding regulation while wearing occult language as armor. This is one of the biggest problems that I see with the left-hand path today, and a lot of people on the left-hand path, is they're not integrating anything. They're not doing actual shadow work. They're not doing actual work. They're afraid of the work. They're terrified of the work. They don't want introspection. They want avoidance dressed in, dramatic garb to say that, they're doing some kind of work, right? And like the ridiculous amounts of creators or people in comment sections, oh, you need to do shadow work. It's like, it pains me to say this, but I truly believe, and I don't have, numbers to prove this. This is my opinion, but I'm willing to say that I believe that most people that sit there and say that, they've done shadow work or are in shadow work have no fucking idea what shadow work actually is. They have no idea what it is. They have some, popularized, tabloid style headline of what they think shadow work is, and then they roll with that and tell people that that's what they're doing without ever actually knowing the work that goes into it. I am willing to bet so much that most people have no fucking idea what shadow work is and they have never actually done any of it. Want to feed off of their followers. Exactly. They want to feel like they're doing something important or justified. And so therefore, what do? They go to their followers and like, I'm doing shadow work. I need to take a mental health day and not make content because I'm doing shadow work. And then the next day they make content and like, oh yes, like the shadow work was deep. And it's like, after a fucking day? Like, I'm sorry, anyone that's ever actually done shadow work knows that it's a process and knows for a fact you are not doing any shadow work in less than 24 hours. Right? Sorry. And then, oh, the lovely part, trauma as identity culture. This is another part where the left-hand path, has been perverted. Trauma became an identity badge instead of a condition to be worked through. Rather than saying, this wounded me and must be addressed, people say, this is who I am. The left-hand path absorbed this trend without critique and turned pain into a permanent personality. This mirrors what clinical psychology warns against. The book, The Body Keeps the Score, Bessel von der Kolk, shows that unresolved trauma shapes behavior automatically until it is preceded or processed and regulated. Trauma, untreated, does not make someone deep. It makes them reactive. So, an example of this, someone who explains rage, neglect, or emotional volatility as my trauma while refusing repair is not sovereign. They are governed by unintegrated memory. And unfortunately, again, there's a lot of people out there that do that they claim left-hand path, do none of the work, they do none of the shadow work, they do none of the processing that is necessary for the trauma, and they wear that trauma as a badge to say, this is who I am. Much like the people that will put borderline personality disorder on their profiles or bipolar disorder on their profiles on social media, wearing it like a badge, like this is who I am, and you need to expect this of me. And we allowed it. That's the worst part. We allowed it. We didn't push back against this. And then we claim to care about people. Like, we're going to allow you to, wear your trauma and live in your trauma and become a professional victim. We're going to praise you for not dealing with your shit and projecting it onto everybody else. And then allow ourselves to be attacked when someone finally decides to say, hey, man, maybe you should work through this shit. Maybe you shouldn't allow this to be who you are. And then we allowed and permitted, those in those circles and in those ideals to attack us as being bigots because we suggested that people might need to, actually work through their shit. Again, just another reason why I feel like the left-hand path has become so fucking diluted in modern occult culture because we have allowed for this behavior to become, a staple for the left-hand path. And spiritual bypassing dressed as rebellion. This is another one, right? So spiritual bypassing is the use of spiritual ideas to avoid psychological or ethical responsibility. So in the modern left-hand path, bypassing often wears the mask of rebellion. I don't owe anyone anything. I reject moral norms. This is my path. In spiritual bypassing, John Wellwood describes how spiritual language is used to avoid grief, accountability, and repair. The left-hand path version replaces love and light with darkness and freedom, but the mechanism is identical. Right? Refusing therapy, refusing repair, refusing boundaries, and calling it antinomianism is not rebellion. It is avoidance with better branding. And through all of this, through each of one of these examples, we find that, people begin using the left-hand path to justify addiction, abuse, and neglect. This is where ideology becomes dangerous. Addiction is referred to as exploration. Emotional abuse becomes truth-telling. Neglect of partners or children becomes prioritizing the self. No historical left-hand path current supported this. Even transgressive traditions maintained containment, aftercare, and responsibility for fallout. A parent who abandons emotional presence while claiming spiritual depth is not walking a left-hand path. They're abandoning obligation and calling it liberation. A person that, becomes addicted to the drugs, stays addicted to the drugs, and then calls it kind of exploration of self is, again, they're avoiding obligation. They're avoiding responsibility. It is spiritual bypassing. And it happens way too fucking often. Mistaking destruction for transformation. Transformation requires structure, containment, and reconstruction. Destruction alone produces entropy. In alchemical terms, people worship salve and never complete coagula. Jung makes this explicit. Disillusion without reintegration leads to psychosis or chronic instability. Burning relationships, jobs, bodies, right, and communities repeatedly without building anything durable afterward is not intention. It's a loop. It's a behavior pattern. And it's something that, we should avoid. And then it's not just the people that do this. Like, it's not just the problem of the people that do this. Like, some people might come in and some people might say, well, what is your issue with someone else's self-destruction? Why do you need to make them feel bad about their self-destruction? Well, first and foremost, feeling bad about something is kind of the reason why we have corrective action. Because if you're a piece of shit and somebody calls you out for being a piece of shit, then you're more likely to try to stop being a piece of shit. Because other people are pointing out that they don't fucking like you, right? Sitting there and playing this game and be like, oh no, it's all right, man. Like, it's like, yeah, just, let him live his truth. Fuck you and your fucking truth. You fucking idiot. What? I'm only saying what other people are thinking. But it's not just the people that practice this way, or believe this way, or live this way that suffer the fallout, is it? Innocent partners, children, and communities also pay the price. Right? This is the part most practitioners refuse to name. Honestly, most people that see this shit refuse to talk about this part of it. When someone collapses under the banner of the left-hand path, partners absorb emotional volatility, children internalize instability as normal, communities normalize dysfunction as depth, right? In adult children and emotional immature parents, Lindsay Gibson outlines how parental instability creates long-term psychological harm. Spiritual justifications do not reduce that harm. They intensify it by removing accountability. Power that cannot protect the innocent is not power. It is negligence and symbolism. The shadow work never ends. It doesn't. So the hard truth on this part, right? So if your path leaves wreckage you refuse to own, it is not initiation. It is negligence. Initiation increases capacity. Negligence externalizes cost. The defining question of the left-hand path is not how far did you descend, it is who paid the price for your descent. If the answer is always others, then sovereignty was never achieved, only indulgence was. And so the bottom line is the left-hand path did not lose its spine because it became darker. It lost its spine because it stopped demanding responsibility for consequences. That is the rot that the Infernal Covenant exists to cut out. So what's the Infernal Covenant? So let's go over what the Infernal Covenant is and what the fuck we're talking about now, right? Because I know some people are probably going, wait. It's like, wait, what are we talking about now? Right? So, welcome. The Infernal Covenant is not a belief system and not an identity. It is a self-binding oath, entered freely, without promise of salvation, absolution, or rescue. The covenant exists precisely because belief has been used as an aesthetic. In the founder's address, the covenant is framed as a refusal to allow faith, ideology, or symbolism to become a hiding place from consequences. This is not about rebellion or defiance. It is about clarity. The covenant demands that the individual see what follows their choices before acting and then act anyway. Without illusion, anyone can rebel. Few can endure what they knowingly choose. So an example here. A person who claims sovereignty but relies on belief, trauma narratives, or spiritual language to soften the impact of their actions has not entered a covenant. They have entered a justification loop. So binding without divine enforcement, the covenant binds without gods, demons, institutions, or intermediaries enforcing it. There is no punishment promised or reward deferred, no external judgment invoked. This directly opposes salvation-based moral systems which outsource responsibility upward or outward. This aligns with existential ethics. In existentialism is humanism. Jean-Paul Sartre argues that without God, humans bear total responsibility for their choices without appeal. The covenant operationalizes this principle. Failure is not sin, it is consequence. Repair is not forgiveness, it is maintenance. The covenant explicitly rejects absolution without transformation and rejects moral outsourcing to gods, demons, trauma, society, or fate. So, the example of this, there is no confession here that cleans the slate. There is only action that restores order, or refusal that deepens collapse. Sovereignty in the covenant is not declared, it is measured. The covenant states plainly that there are those who enter are judged not by belief or intention, but by what they build, what they protect, and what endures because of them. This mirrors classical virtue ethics. The Nicomachean ethics, Aristotle defines virtue as habituated action that produces stability over time. The covenant takes this further by making the hearth, the household, the body, and the mind non-metaphorical obligations. If sovereignty does not stabilize a life, it is not sovereignty, it is aesthetic. So covenant versus belief. Belief asks what you accept is true. The covenant asks what you are willing to do or be bound by. Belief can be held privately, revised endlessly, and expressed performatively. A covenant is visible only through conduct. The Infernal Covenant explicitly states, this is not a movement, not a refuge, not a place to be seen. It is a standard. So two people may claim the same metaphysics. Only one maintains their household, protects their dependents, and repairs breaches without being chased. Only one is under covenant. Mm-hmm. Ave Baphomet. So why fear-based morality fails? So fear-based systems rely on external surveillance, punishment, or reward. They collapse the moment belief weakens or authority is questioned. The covenant rejects fear entirely. It binds only those who accept the burden of oath willingly, knowing they will be measured by endurance, not declaration. Psychologically, fear suppresses behavior temporarily. Responsibility reshapes it long term. In Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl shows that responsibility freely chosen sustains coherence even under extreme conditions, while fear-based compliance fractures under pressure. Fear creates obedience. Obedience is not sovereignty. And so why does self-authored obligation, why is self-authored obligation stronger than divine threat? Right? So this is something that I had to examine under great detail. A divine threat ends where belief ends. A self-authored obligation follows you even when no one is watching. The covenant explicitly states that reverence, whether toward God, demon, ancestor, or self, is proven by how one lives in silence, not by declaration. This echoes Jung's warning in The Undiscovered Self. When individuals do not develop internal authority, they submit unconsciously to external systems or impulses. Self-authored obligation creates an internal regulator that does not require belief enforcement. So no God is watching you clean your house, show up for your child, regulate your shadow, or repair harm. That is precisely why it matters. Exactly, Melissa. Yes. Doing the right thing when no one is watching. In silence. That's what in silence means, right? Like when you follow your path, even in silence, when no one is watching, when you're not talking to anybody, that is the most important part. That's the differential between somebody that's doing it aesthetically and somebody that's actually doing it, right? So no God is watching you, right? So then that's the point. The covenant does not hold because something is judging you. It holds because you bound yourself and you know exactly what follows if you break your word. This works because it encapsulates the covenant's core refusal. No rescue, no absolution, and no illusion. Only clarity, obligation, and consequence. The Infernal Covenant is not a higher belief system layered onto the left-hand path. It is a return to function. It restores the left-hand path as a path where sovereignty is proven through maintenance, restraint, and repair, not through rebellion, aesthetics, or collapse. That is why it threatens people who prefer freedom without weight. This is why, like, some people that I have shown or described the Infernal Covenant to have not such nice things to say about it. And I feel that the Infernal Covenant is something that is absolutely necessary today. It is the trifecta, the triptych, that my personal triptych to the occult community. Infernal Compass, for those that want to live life within the Infernal Covenant. The Leor and Pip, or Infernal Kids, for parents that want to bring their children up with the values and responsibilities of self, and to help parents kind of guide their children through that process while teaching kids very important lessons and values that they can apply to the real world. And then the Infernal Covenant itself, which is kind of like the apex to say, this is where I want to be and this is where I want to stay. No, there's no priests. It's not it's not a religion. It's like, so there are going to be, structurally speaking, there obviously has to be some kind of structure, right? And structure isn't for, you know, this person's in charge and this person isn't, and I'm below this person. But to explain kind of like what the idea is of the structure, right? So let me crack something open here for you guys, okay? I wish I could just drop the PDF in the chat and, you know, you guys could just kind of go through it and read it that way, but, you know, just kind of is what it is, right? So the Infernal Covenant. God, this thing, like, I've gone ham on this thing over the last week, right? There's 38 pages to this thing now. But I do go through, hold on a second. I got my little one laying here. Just got to make sure that he's okay. All right, he's good. He's good. He's just making noises and whatnot. So I mean, there are rights and things like that. I have no idea what that is. So yeah. So there is a thing though that, so you have the Infernal Covenant, but in an aspect of the Infernal Covenant are hearth circles, right? So the purpose of a hearth circle, the hearth circle exists for function, not belonging, right? So its purpose is mutual vigilance, coordinated protection and aid, skill exchange relevant to guarding the temple. The temple is like everything that you would consider like home, right? It's yourself, it's your family, it's your dependents, it's your job, right? All the things that comprise your temple, right? So the temple is, that's what temple is. So instead of explaining it every single time I talk about it, I just called it the temple, right? So skill exchange relevant to guarding the temple, witness to accountability, not enforcement of morality, load sharing without authority transfer, right? They're like Freemasons. That's what I figured as soon as you said like Elks. I'm thinking like, okay, like a lodge, I guess. Like, so no, I've never heard of them. So functional definitions, right? So mutual vigilance. So mutual vigilance is not surveillance nor moral policing. It is refusing to look away when erosion becomes visible. Members do not monitor behavior, they notice erosion. Withdrawal from responsibility, chronic neglect of the temple, repeated justification in place of repair, increased dependence on the circle for stability. Right? Vigilance does not correct, it names. What a member does after being named remains their responsibility. Silence after naming is not cruelty, it is respect for sovereignty. Really? It might be something to look into then. Coordinated protection and aid. The circle exists to respond when individual capacity is temporarily exceeded, not when discipline is inconvenient. Aid is coordinated, not assumed. No one is rescued without request. No one intervenes without consent, and no one is obligated beyond declared limits. right? Protection may include material help, presence, skills, or temporary coverage of duties, but never at the cost of another member's temple. A circle that sacrifices one temple to save another has violated the covenant. Right? So, skill exchange in service of the temple. Skill sharing is pragmatic. Skills may be exchanged related to physical preparedness, crisis response, emotional regulation under pressure, domestic order, boundary enforcement, discipline, and maintenance practices. There is no teaching authority. Skills are offered, not imposed. No member is elevated to expert, mentor, or guide. The moment knowledge becomes leverage, the circle is corrupted, right? So to talk about the hierarchy, so it's more of a hierarchy of obligation than it is hierarchy of people. Let me get to the section that talks about kind of like the hierarchy of the circle, like what we're looking at inside of the circle, right? Yeah, Maeve is a Freemason, so like I have so much like in this. Like I really wish I could show this to you guys. Let me see. Let me try to show this to you guys really quick. So I have gone through this so ridiculously, right? Acrobat. Like I have gone through this in such a way that is just disgusting. So here we go. Let me close this out of the way. So this is kind of like the book, the Infernal Covenant book that we're looking at here. So through this, right, so here's the hierarchy and order of obligation, regulatory, right? So the defined order is the self, the temple, which is home, kin, body, mind, entrusted dependence, the hearth circle, and then all external obligations, affiliations, ideologies, and pursuits. So that is kind of like the four-step kind of looking inside of temple, right? So your job, for example, like when you go to work, the way you pay your bills, that's not considered an external obligation. That is part of the temple, right? And so obligation to the temple, all of those things are in there, right? And it just keeps going and going and going, guys. Like, I mean, it is I've spent a lot of time on this, if you can't tell. So another thing here, so also this is another thing with hearth circles and just the covenant in and of itself, and maybe people are going to not like this, but I don't really give a shit. So admission with prior legal record. So prior legal record does not bear entry except sexual assault or rape, domestic violence, child abuse or endangerment, predatory behavior toward minors, any sex offender registry inclusion for any reason. These exclusions are permanent and non-negotiable. So if you join up and you are found to have had any of these, you're gone. You're out. Bye-bye. And it's not going to be an enjoyable experience. Okay? So... Nope. I mean, somebody does have to kind of like openly, you know, give that information inside of a hearth circle. So I'm not going to force background checks on anybody. So, but you know, it's not going to be too hard to, you know, figure out if somebody is, you know, on a registry, because most of those things would put you on a registry anyway. right? So Hearth circles, like, I just kind of talked about what it is. So a Hearth circle is kind of like small group, kind of like between 3 to 7 people, that do kind of like weekly or bi-weekly meetings, to just kind of help people kind of like go through the covenant, like maintain the covenant, or talk about things that, you're having a hard time with, things that you're struggling with, and kind of, get, feedback and stuff like that. So there's a whole structure that I've built around, honesty should be expected amongst brothers and sisters. I completely agree, Maeve. And that's kind of like the thing, right? Because inside of the Hearth circles, like, we are, all considered, equally brothers and sisters. There are no fathers, there's no mothers. It's just brothers and sisters. And it's co-ed, so it's not just guys, it's, anyone that feels like, they want to really take, the left-hand path to kind of like, the next level. And, it's the cornerstone of the belief is the temple, right? That is the cornerstone of the belief, is your home, your dependence, your responsibilities to self and those that depend on you. And then everything else becomes secondary to that. And so the hierarchy inside of it, inside of a Hearth circle, is because the thing was, I initially, when I first set this up, I was like, okay, I don't want there to be like a defined hierarchy inside of the Hearth circle. But then I was kind of sitting there and I'm thinking, I was like, well, then who the fuck are we going to look to for like who's like when we get a group going, like who's going to be looked at for like organizing and shit like that, or, staying on topic during the meetings and stuff like that to make sure, like, so I was like, well, I guess there kind of has to be some kind of, structure in that way. Right. So I did create, kind of like, a provisional structure, for like the meetings and things like that. Right. And so, most people are considered bearers, right? So bearers are just people that bear the oath, right? So everyone is a bearer, right? So we bear the oath. And I'm thinking that inside the PDF, right? Exactly. Oh, excuse me. Excuse me, everyone. Here, let me go into this right here, because I know that I have it in here. I must have forgotten I must have not added it to the PDF, which is surprising, right? Which is something that's absolutely necessary when it comes to the Hearth circle, is, the structure. Why would you hit me in the face with your tail, man? I just want to make sure that I stay consistent with, the terminology that I've chosen to use for this, right? Here, so let me do an F3. Okay. Second. Found it. All right. Jesus Christ. So the roles, the roles and the structure here, right? So first and foremost, in most meetings, there's something called the chair, right? So the chair is just somebody that is chosen to have a topic to discuss for that week, right? So somebody like, and that's a rotating thing, right? So every week we can choose somebody different that has something that they want to bring to the group and they want to kind of talk about, and that's kind of going to be like, you know, the basis of like the conversation for that week. And then you have the anchor. So the anchor coordinates scheduling and logistics, holds meeting structure, not personal authority, right? Intervenes when structural boundaries are crossed, and that's the anchor, right? So the anchor is kind of like, if you're going to think of like a group leader, that would be the anchor. Below the anchor would be the watch, right? So observes drift, dependency, disorder, coercion, dominance, and destabilizing dynamics, right? Names problems without moralizing and intervenes sparingly to protect function, right? Tyrone, honestly, give me a second, guys. All right, I need to get the little one up to his mom. I will be right back. Okay? Oh no, sorry, I was muted. So inside of the hearth regulations, this is actually that exact question is covered, right? And mentioned multiple times. So, or very similarly, similar situation, right? Situations are mentioned inside of the hearth, like kind of like the regulatory body of this. So bearers are required to assess foreseeable consequences before acting, including legal exposure, employment repercussions, impact on dependents, portability of arrest or probability of arrest, charges, or surveillance, Failure to consider consequences does not absolve responsibility. Risk taken without capacity to absorb outcome is recklessness. So the admission with prior legal record, again, if the prior legal record is sexual assault or rape, domestic violence, child abuse or endangerment, predatory behavior toward minors, any sex offender registry inclusion for any reason, these exclusions are permanent and non-negotiable. So no, somebody with a past like that wouldn't be stopped from taking the oath, but would not be allowed in a hearth. How is domestic violence a fake crime? Like, if you beat the shit out of your partner, that's domestic violence. Domestic violence just iterates where and the circumstances, right? It's a different classification. So the thing is domestic violence is still a crime, but then you also get hit with assault and battery. So assault is the threat of action, and then battery is the actual action, right? So assault, and I think the thing is people kind of misinterpret assault. I mean, I guess depending on which state, but in like New York State, the threat of action, like if you were to lift your hand up in action or like this to hit someone, that's assault. Then battery is the actual action of hitting somebody, right? I mean, that can be true and not true. I mean, it depends on the situation. But again, I think that's why the distinction exists, right? Because it is slightly different than, other situations. And that distinction of where the action takes place and the circumstances surrounding it need to be taken into consideration. So the last part of that, right? That it was excused of something but didn't get put on a list and it never happened again. The fact remains that regardless of not being put on a list, something that is against the regulatory body has happened. And in my opinion, I'm sorry, but someone that has predatory behavior will always have predatory behavior. And because within the Infernal Covenant, like as the covenant stands and as the covenant is built, it's, personal accountability, personal responsibility to the extreme, and the focal point is the temple. Predatory behavior does not have an excuse. And in my experience and from my understanding and everything that I have seen and experienced in my life, a predator will always be a predator. There is no fixing that. So, and I mean, I'm sorry, but I have, it's not allowed. It's not allowed. And anyone that does allow it to take place, like when hearth circles start to kind of grow out, and if someone allows something like that inside of their hearth circle, they're not part of the covenant. Plain and simple. There are things that I would like to say regarding people that practice or have practiced predatory behavior But I can't say that on YouTube. And then those are my thoughts and my opinions. And you know, and if a child has been harmed, or those that are weaker than you have been taken advantage of and harmed, then you have no place in the covenant. Because one of the things that the covenant outlines most strictly is it is our duty to protect the temple and protect those in the temple. And like, if it's something that, like, under normal circumstances, exactly, exactly. That's the part of this that I haven't discussed, and I can't discuss it on YouTube. Well, the problem is like it's not our place to determine whether or not a conviction is real or not real, or, you know, it's honestly not our place to do that. You know, we can't take the law into our own hands, so we have to, you know, we have to some level, accept the legal body that exists and use that, because we're not a sovereign nation, right? As, you know, a spiritual path. So we can't take the law into our own hands and create our own dynamic. And Tyrone, like, honestly, like, we would have to know specifically what it is, to make that determination. Honestly, because, you know, if a child was harmed or a dependent was harmed and it resulted in the loss of your children, that is clearly outlined in the covenant. Loss of children, you know, is kind of part of the, it's against what the covenant represents. And so that is a big thing, to lose access to your children, and is not something that can be ignored. And I'm sorry that happened, and I'm sorry that that's something that you've had to go through, you know, regardless of the reasoning behind it. But again, it's accountability, man. It's like, you know, it's not making excuses or trying to play it down, right? I mean, it's something to be discussed, and again, like, it would have to come down. Like, I couldn't promise you anything, man. Like, it would honestly be based off of the circumstances of the situation and the specifics. I mean, I wish I could sit here and say that I would, you know, but the thing is there are no exceptions. You know, it really kind of depends on, you know, what it is. But as it stands, as of right now, it would be a no. It would be a no, like, without more detail. but we're not going to talk about that on the live, man. Right? You know, like that's that's just kind of it's not for discussion on live video. So, but yeah, so moving forward with what I have outlined here, yeah. Let me get back to my note list. There we go. All right, so we're talking about like the hierarchy of obligation, right? With this. So we talked about fear-based morality, why self-authored obligation is stronger than divine threat. We talked about that. And so, again, the hierarchy of obligation is self, the temple, and then the hearth, right? So the self, body, mind, discipline, livelihood. The covenant is explicit that authority begins within the self and is proven throughout restraint, maintenance, and capacity to act without compulsion. The infernal covenant, the body and mind are not symbolic. They are instruments of will. A practitioner who neglects health, stability, or livelihood erodes their ability to choose freely. In psychological terms, self-governance requires executive function. When sleep, nutrition, sobriety, or emotional regulation collapse, impulse replaces judgment. Jung warned that when ego strength is insufficient, unconscious material takes command, not as insight, but as possession. So a person who cannot regulate their nervous system but claims spiritual authority is not sovereign. They are unmanaged. Now, the temple, right? The temple is partner, children, dependence, practice, integrity, continuity, right? The covenant treats the temple as sacred ground, not a metaphor. Home, kin, and dependence are living trusts, not optional extensions of personal becoming. Responsibility here is not emotional preference, it is obligation. This aligns with developmental psychology. In adult children of emotional immature parents, Lindsay Gibson documents how parental instability creates long-term psychological harm. Spiritual ideology, again, does not mitigate that harm. It compounds it when used to excuse absence or volatility, right? Moving forward, your practice is subordinate to function. Ritual, devotion, and gnosis exist to support continuity, not replace it. This rejects the common inversion where spiritual practice is used to escape responsibility. In the covenant, neglecting the temple or your practice in favor of mystical pursuits is a breach, not devotion. So a ritual that destabilizes a household or compromises mental clarity is misaligned, regardless of the symbolism or intensity. So the hearth or community. Community is explicitly hereditary. It exists to support function, not replace sovereignty. The covenant prohibits any structure that substitutes for self-governance or household responsibility, including spiritual groups that reward visibility over reliability. Reliability is the most important part here, right? The mirror's sociological findings on dependency systems, groups that provide identity, validation, or rescue erode individual agency over time. The covenant starves this dynamic deliberately. If participation in community weakens the home, the community is corrupt by definition. So why neglecting self collapses everything downstream, right? No, it wouldn't. It most definitely would not be illegal, and it's not discrimination. It is to say that if you have a certain record, if I don't want, those people involved, those types of people involved in, what I'm creating here, then I am under no obligation to allow those types of people in. Now, it is their responsibility to, make that known. There's no background check or anything like that. But I mean, the thing is at the end of the day, jobs do it all the time, right? This isn't a job. I'm not limiting somebody's ability to, I'm not limiting somebody's ability to make money or anything like that. Church does it, right? And I think that it is really needed, right? If somebody is, accused of, sexual assault or rape or, harm against children, right? Legally, you can't. I'm saying that, like, jobs do it all the time. And that's not what I'm doing. I use that as a point of kind of comparison. That's not what I'm doing. I'm not denying employment. And, I'm sorry, but, somebody that and honestly, like with the way that I view people with those types of records, again, like, I mean, I can't, exactly. Like, I mean, there's no legal, there's nothing legal or illegal about me denying access to certain people to the covenant. I'm sorry, but I'm not into this love and light shit, right? And I won't do it. Like, I won't do it. Like, I'm not, if everyone deserves a second chance, yes, 100%. But I don't have to allow that second chance to be incorporated into what's being created. And I mean, I'll look into it, but Well, I mean, there you go. Right? It is generally legal to exclude people with specific convictions when the group is private, not open to the public. Membership is voluntary and selective, not automatic. The exclusion is tied to safety, trust, or function, not protected traits. The rule is applied consistently, not selectively. The group is not providing a public service. Hey, Big Rooney, I'm with you. I'm with you. And exactly how I have it outlined is 100% legal. We do not allow individuals with convictions for X. Certain offenses permanently disqualify participation, and membership requires, you know, that these particular types of convictions have never happened. And that is completely lawful. So, yeah. Just because somebody fucked up in their life and they feel excluded because it's something that they want to be a part of, it's not my problem. There are certain things in life in this world that I personally believe are completely unfucking forgivable. And if society wants to provide, you know, a second chance on that shit, then cool. But again, I would like to not discuss this particular issue live. If Tyrone wants to reach out and talk in private, then we can talk in private and we can make a decision from there. But to try to sit here and, you know what I mean? Like, this is just not the place for it. And I'm going to have to turn my camera off and on again. God damn it. I don't know why this happens constantly. Give me a second here, because I still got more I got to go through here, guys. But from the limited information that was provided by Tyrone, I would have to say no. If Tyrone wants to have a more in-depth conversation, then we can have a more in-depth conversation and discuss it in private. And that's where a conversation like this needs to happen, right? So camera's coming back, guys. So, So why does spirituality not excuse absence? The covenant rejects salvation narratives that trade present responsibility for promised meaning elsewhere. So a calling that removes someone from their obligations is explicitly opposed. In Man's Search of Meaning, again, Viktor Frankl argues that the meaning is proven through responsibility taken, not transcendence claimed. Absence framed as devotion is still absence, right? See, the thing is, Operation, is like you're starting to come across rather threatening, right? There's nothing to be careful of. I made the goddamn thing, and if I only want pink elephants involved in the fucking thing, then only fucking pink elephants are going to be involved in the fucking thing. I have zero respect for anyone that has sexually assaulted someone, that has raped someone, that has done anything that harms children. And I could give a fuck less about these people's feelings. I don't care. I don't give a shit. If you've done anything that harms a kid, you deserve to fucking die. I think that that should be capital fucking punishment. So if you want to clip it and you want to put it out there, then fucking go for it, because it's not something that I'm afraid of. It's not something that I'm ashamed to say. No, I get what you're saying. From how you read it? All right. Well, unfortunately, keeping up with chat is difficult. But as someone that has suffered through abuse, multiple different types of abuse, I feel very, very strongly about anyone that even comes remotely close to that type of shit. Like, fervently so. And in a path that is being created so I turn the tables. No, I got you. I got you. I got you. Oh. That shit will fuck up a person's life for so many years before they're able to be remotely a normal person again. And one of the things that I wanted to incorporate into this path is something that I don't think the Christians should have a monopoly on or have a claim to fame with, is being protective of those in need. I don't believe that should be only a Christian value. I find that very much in the left-hand path. The idea of understanding and knowing. No. I mean, a lot of people went through like certain types of like, getting smacked around here and there, but like, I've looking at my past lives. I've talked about what's happened to me as a kid. What happened to me as a kid shouldn't have fucking happened. I believe in discipline. What I went through wasn't discipline. So you think someone made a mistake, abused their kid, is the same as a parent who would abuse? So here's the thing, though. Like, abusing your kid isn't a mistake. That's your first fuck up right there. Abusing your kid in any way, that's not a mistake. That's a decision. That's a choice. And that shows complete lack of self-control. Doesn't matter if it's once or if it's multiple times. you know, if you abuse your child, there's no fucking excuse for that. Now, if your kid's stepping out of line and, you know, you smack his ass or something like that, then, you know, that's discipline. Yeah, if you abuse a kid, you've got to be sick in the head. Yeah, exactly. Hold on a second, chat. I'm here to learn good things and get the impulse to move on with my life. Exactly. Well, I mean, that's what this is supposed to be for, right? It's not supposed to be, you know, people trying to back me into a corner, you know, to see if, you know, I say something or do something, you know, that they can use against me. You know, what I'm building is supposed to be, you know, wholesome in the idea of we protect our temple, we protect our people, we protect our communities, we protect each other, right? We stop each other from doing, you know, stupid things, right? And to sit here and try to fandangle, you know, like a loophole into the way that I think about things, I'm very set in my principles. It is the left-hand path and how I understand and use the left-hand path that has allowed me to be so set in my principles. That's never going to change. And the Infernal Covenant is an extension of those principles. It's an extension of those principles for people that want something like this connected to the left-hand path. That is the left-hand path at its natural evolutionary state. So the hard rule is that you cannot govern yourself. If you cannot govern yourself, you have no business invoking power. Power amplifies capacity. If capacity is unstable, amplification spreads damage. This is why the Infernal Covenant places self-governance and household stability before any claim to authority, practice, or influence. Not as morality, but as containment. So the hierarchy exists on obligation, right? It's not a hierarchy of worth. It is hierarchy of load-bearing responsibility. Ignore it, and everything built on top collapses. Right? So there is tenets and there are commandments that follow suit in this. Yeah? So, as such, let me go through them for you. I'm no longer answering questions like this, so don't waste my time, please. So, the 10 Infernal Commandments. Stand as your own authority, bound by your oath. You answer to your word, your will, and the consequences that follow. Honor your chosen higher power through discipline, not obedience. Whether God, demon, ancestor, or self, reverence is proven by action and restraint. The temple comes before glory. Home, kin, body, and mind are defended before ambition, reputation, or ideology. Be the shield between danger and your people. You do not send others where you refuse to stand. Keep your shadow trained and your blade sheathed until needed. Strength without control brings ruin to the hearth. Do not invite disorder into your home. Chaos tolerated becomes chaos enthroned. Provide, protect, and maintain the hearth. Neglected home is a broken oath. Violence is neither sin nor sport. It is a grave tool taken up only to preserve life, boundary, or honor. Carry the weight of those bound to you. Kinship is not sentiment. It is responsibility made visible. Live so your name remains unashamed at the hearth. Let your presence strengthen the house, even in your absence. And then the 6 infernal tenets. Oath-bound sovereignty. Thou shalt rule thyself by vow, lest another rule thee by force. Reverence made flesh. Faith that does not shape the hand is faith unproven. Earth and kin, the temple is hallowed ground. What abides within it is worthy of defense unto cost. Measured strength, power walks softly until summoned. Fury is called forth, not indulged. Shadow forged into steel, darkness mastered becomes vigilance, darkness unleashed becomes ruin. An enduring becoming. Thou shalt be refined by time, that fewer evils reach thy threshold. Those are the 10 infernal commandments and the 6 infernal tenets. The infernal covenant does not worship Lucifer. Lucifer is definitely a part of this. It does not petition him, submit to him, or outsource authority to him. Lucifer is used as an archetypal example of execution without excuse. The covenant states this plainly. Lucifer is remembered not as a god to be obeyed, but as one who acted with full sight of consequence and bore the result without appeal. Bootless, you have a good one. Thank you for being here. So this matters because the left-hand path is not about defiance for its own sake. It is about clarity, responsibility, and endurance. Lucifer represents action taken without illusion, not rebellion as identity. Anyone can rebel. Few can act knowing the cost and refuse the comfort of ignorance. This framing aligns strongly with modern LHP authors who reject worship in favor of self-deification through responsibility, not entitlement. Okay? So the tenets is sovereignty is earned daily, right? Sovereignty in the covenant is not declared once and carried forever, right? It is maintained through daily conduct. The covenant explicitly rejects salvation narratives and permanent states of attainment. There is no final arrival, only vigilance and becoming. This mirrors Apotheosis by Michael W. Ford, where self-deification is framed as a continual process of discipline, refinement, and responsibility, not a symbolic title. So if sovereignty disappears the moment life applies pressure, It was never sovereign. It was never sovereignty. It was comfort mistaken for power. Loki is playing around with you. Trickster, since somehow the same. Yeah, I kind of feel that vibe a little bit, I suppose. But the thing is here's the thing. So when making something like this, it is an inevitability that it is going to be brought to question. Certain aspects of it are going to be brought to question. That is expected. It's going to be attacked. Anything new like this, like usually when people see you building something, they want to attack it. They want to tear it down. People hate success. People hate it when someone takes the initiative to do something themselves, to change their lives, to move their lives around, right? And wants to create something that's going to be consistent in approach and application of ideals. Exactly. Thank you, Gray. I appreciate that. So it's something that I expect. And at the end of the day, I'm putting myself out there, right? Like I'm putting myself out there and I'm putting out something that I created, you know. Operation, you know what? I don't disagree with you. I don't disagree with you. And it's a test. It's a test of endurance. It's a test of, you know, how strong the foundation is, right? So, you know, if I collapse under pressure, then I have no right building something like this. It's that simple. If I collapse under pressure that others put onto me for this, then I have no right to create it. I have no right to build it. And so I'm not put off by certain aspects of this being brought into question. I'm not upset by it. I'm not angry by it. I'm passionate about my reasoning behind it, behind why I've done, you know, created certain limitations. I'm not angry at people that, you know, have questions or doubts or things like that, but I am passionate for my reasoning. And because this is so strongly it's so strongly foundational, the temple, a lot of the regulatory aspects of this have been built around maintaining the safety of the temple. Because the hearth circle needs to be an extension almost of the covenant itself. And the covenant itself is about foundationally protecting the temple, protecting self and protecting the temple. And so therefore, a hearth circle can't permit or allow anything that could be perceived as a potential threat to come into it. Because a threat to the circle is a threat to the temple. And the hearth circle is almost like kind of like a first line shield, you know, to the temple. It is a grouping of people that want to be, you know, that level of accountable, that level of responsible to help each other, raise each other higher than where they are, to deal with things that are difficult for them to deal with, of maintaining the oath, you know, to the covenant. And as a protective measure to the temple. I agree with you, Operation. I 100% agree with you. I 100% agree with you. And so perhaps some of my reactions may have seemed out of form, but it is the passion that I have for situations that have happened to me and that I refuse to allow to happen to my children, and I don't want it to happen to anyone else's children, that I am so passionate with those ideas. So even with accountability suffered, the consequences still shouldn't be forgiven. So, yeah, I mean, if the way that I look at it is when it comes to harming people that are weaker than yourself, just in general, like let's just generalize it a little bit more and stop being so specific with certain things. When it comes to causing harm, whether physical or emotional or, you know, whatever, to those weaker than you, I believe that that type of action says so much more about a person than their own words ever will. And in my opinion, a moment of weakness or a moment of lapsed judgment is drinking too much one night and getting drunk and stumbling on the stairs and maybe chipping a tooth or busting your own nose, you know, or, you know, a night spent in the bathroom puking your guts out because, you know, you made some bad choices. Those are acceptable things, you know, or even, you know, getting involved with the wrong crowd and tagging some buildings and, you know, stuff like that, or stealing from a store maybe, you know. Those are all things that, you know, I don't condone it, but those are mistakes that people can make. And, you know, things that I think that most people kind of go through. But when the mentality comes in and the actions directly affect another and harms another that is reliant on you for protection, or should be able to be reliant on you for protection, and you cause harm, that's unforgivable. And I'm not talking about silly accidents. I can't tell you how many times I've jammed up my kids' fingers in doors because I wasn't paying attention, and how I felt like shit afterwards, you know, and, you know, I would, you know, cry with him and tell him how sorry I was for not paying attention, you know, trying to close the door. It's like, why wouldn't it close? Oh, fuck your fingers. Oh, I'm so, you know. But to, you know, a home which is known to be abusive, even if it happened once. Exactly. You know, and so when an individual makes decisions and those decisions cause direct harm to those that are vulnerable, I can't accept that. I cannot accept that somebody makes a decision like that, makes a choice like that, harm happens, and then claims it a mistake. That's not a mistake, in my opinion. It's a choice. You know, it's like getting drunk and then driving a car, getting into an accident, and, you know, something horrible happens. You made a choice. Even in an inebriated state, one should be aware of the consequence of their actions. I've always been, you know, I've never, you know, I've gotten shit-faced fucking drunk, but I've never forgotten anything that I've done. The drunkest I've ever been was in Istanbul, Turkey, and I mixed wine and Baileys and vodka and whiskey, and I drank. Other people were paying, right? So I drank everything that they put in front of me. I think I did 4 car bombs that night. You know, Irish car bombs. And I remember vomiting outside the taxi window all the way home, and it was a 25-minute ride. It was 25 minutes of straight vomiting outside that window. I didn't drive. I didn't claim that I was able to drive. I was aware that I couldn't. You know, falling asleep in my spaghetti in the restaurant that we went to after drinking was probably part of, good reasoning to kind of understand that, you know what? I should not be behind a wheel. You know, I should not be moving a vehicle at this time. And I remember barely being able to walk up the stairs, and I remember hitting the couch and passing out, then crawling to the bathroom and throwing up some more, and then crawling back to I remember all of it. So it's through experience of things that have happened to me in my own, drug-fueled youth, drug and alcohol-fueled youth. There's no excuse for a mistake to happen. I have been a father for 11 years, and there's never been a mistake like that in 11 years. Because it's not a mistake. It's a choice. So yes, I'm very passionate about the limits that I've put on this. And I'm sorry for those that feel left out and want something like this, want to be a part of. But I can't do it. I can't. So there's that. There's a lot more to go through here. And I want to get kind of want to smash through this pretty quickly, okay? So the last part, we're talking about the tenets and commandments, are kind of going over the overview here, right? So sovereignty in the covenant is not declared once and carried forever, right? Like we went over this, right? It's something that you constantly work through every single day. And power, when we obtain power, it demands upkeep. Power degrades when neglected. The covenant treats power like a structure, not a trait. What is not maintained decays into instability or corruption. This includes the body, the household, the mind, and the temple itself. The Bible of the adversary, Ford emphasizes the adversarial power is rooted in sustained discipline and clarity, not indulgence or spectacle. Power without upkeep becomes liability. Lucifer as an archetype is not admired for defiance, but for endurance under consequence. Right? And no harm without ownership of consequence. The covenant is explicit. Failure is not sin, but consequence. Harm does not disappear because intention was pure or symbolism was intense. If harm occurs, it must be owned, repaired when possible, and borne without appeal. And this aligns with Lords of the Left-Hand Path by Stephen Flowers, where the LHP is framed as radical responsibility for one's effects on the world, not moral exemption. If others absorb the damage of your actions while you claim insight, your path is extractive, not sovereign. And will requires discipline. Will is not desire. Will is trained capacity. The covenant repeatedly emphasizes restraint over indulgence and vigilance over impulse. This echoes the book of the law, where do what thou wilt is explicitly misunderstood. Crowley defines will as a discovered and disciplined trajectory, not momentary want. Indulgence is a failure of will, not an expression of it. Lucifer is, in this framing, represents will exercised with full awareness, not compulsion. So the covenant defines the body and the mind as instruments of will, not obstacles of transcendence. Neglecting them undermines agency at the most basic level. This principle is shared across LHP systems. Power cannot be exercised through a vessel that is unmanaged. A practitioner who cannot regulate sleep, substance use, or emotional volatility is not expressing depth. They are leaking authority. Do not abandon your obligations in the name of gnosis. The covenant directly opposes spiritual narratives that excuse neglect of home, kin, or responsibility for the sake of experience or insight. In Black Magic, Michael Aquino emphasizes that greater self-awareness increases responsibility rather than diminishing it. Gnosis that fractures the household is not illumination, it is imbalance. Lucifer does not flee consequence, neither does the covenant bearer. And do not recruit others into your collapse. The covenant rejects dragging partners, children, or communities into unresolved shadow, addiction, or instability. Collapse does not become sacred because it is shared. If your path requires others to tolerate volatility, neglect, or harm so you can continue working, you are conscripting them into your failure. Do not confuse indulgence with liberation. Indulgence seeks relief. Liberation seeks capacity. The covenant explicitly rejects chaos masquerading as freedom and indulgence reframed as virtue. This is where Lucifer is most misunderstood. He is not the archetype of indulgence. He is the archetype of choice made without illusion. This distinction is foundational in serious LHP literature and absent in pop cult discourse. Sarah Sawyer, welcome, welcome, welcome. I feel like I'm going to make... you know what? Go for it. Make a lot of enemies. Because at least you're saying something worth saying. Like, if you don't piss people off, you know... I think it's a cue to know, like, you know, that you're doing something worth doing. So, I know I regularly piss people off. But Jordan, thank you for the $10. Greatly appreciate it. Welcome in, welcome in. I don't give a fuck what people think. I just know it's coming. Yeah, but, you know, it's all fun. It's all fun and games until someone loses an eye, and then it's just fucking hilarious. Well, I mean, the thing is that that's what I do. I mean, the thing is I've had so many people, like even today's show, for example, the reason why it's running to almost 2.5 fucking hours this morning is, you know, I'm talking about, you know, kind of like what I'm considering kind of like the natural evolution of the left-hand path, something that I'm putting together. And, you know, there are certain aspects of it people don't like, and, you know, people are poking and prodding and trying to find the holes, and, you know, it is what it is. And when I don't give them the holes that they want to have, you know, the loopholes that they want, yeah, I'm a horrible fucking person. So it is what it is, right? like that. You got it. Yeah. No gotchas here, right? Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So I'm gonna be honest, I'm not very familiar with JD Temple. I mean I know who he is. I know of him. You know, so I can't say that I have any opinions on his work. We had Thorn on here, you know. I won't tell the whole story soon enough. And we had a Thorn on here not too long ago. That was an interesting conversation, to say the least. And until that part I know. Yeah, that part I know. He's part of Balg. I know that much. I know that he's connected to a good friend of the channel, Behemoth X. So I know that they're connected in some way. You know. Yeah. Joe is he's a good friend of the channel. And Thorn was good to have on. It was hard to keep up with him, but it was a good conversation nonetheless. So he was on the show not that long ago. Like I think it was like maybe a month ago he was on. Like we did a 2-hour, I think it was a 2-hour episode, 3-hour episode. Oh, you fucking cunt of a machine. Oh, this is, so I've learned what the problem is. It is an error with the EOS software. The software just dies and then I have to restart it. So I'm sorry about that. Time in person with him. So yeah, I've had a lot of conversations with a lot of, you know, people that were related to, you know, Balg. Curtis Joseph is another one that you know, I regularly communicate with and talk to. Yeah, Braxis, I think I remember seeing you in the chat when he was on. I'll be honest, I've actually tried my best to reach out to JD to get him on the show, this show in particular, but I haven't heard back. So, you know, but I did reach out to him right after I had Thorn on. I was like, I think the natural progression to that would be to have JD on. So, but yeah, I mean, if he's in kind of like, you know, a thing right now where he's not doing that type of stuff, you know. Yeah. Curtis is a friend, not just a friend of the channel, but, you know, a friend of mine. You know, he'd be aggressive sometimes, but I kind of appreciate that about him. You know, fishing outbreak, outbreak lives out fishing. That's what I get from that. Yeah, I mean, shit, Sarah. I mean, if you ever want to pop in on here and, like, you know, after you get your stuff started, you want to, you know, do a conversation on the show, I'd be more than happy to have you on for at least a year. Gotcha. Fair enough. Well, I have no intentions of stopping the show. Like, I mean, I've been doing Satan. I mean, I think I've been doing Satan and Coffee for about 2 years. I've been doing podcasts for like this for about almost 10 years now. So I'm not going anywhere. My happy ass will still be here. So rock on. Yeah, let me know when you're down to do it. Shoot me an email, daddiestdate@gmail.com, or find me on Discord and shoot me a DM, and, you know, we can go from there and work something out, you know. I enjoy it, man. Like I enjoy doing this. Like it's you know, it is a hobby. You know, I mean, I make some money off of it, but like, I mean, nothing to fucking live off of, right? You know, just enough to kind of put back into the show and you know get some new hardware and stuff. You know, to make it look better and sound better. But you know, I just fucking love doing this. And the thing is like, you know, it's never been about, you know, it's never been about for me like becoming kind of like um being notable or being a go-to source or something like that, but it's been about bringing those sources together, right? It's also the reason why the Infernal Covenant, like me building it, like it doesn't have a structure, like it doesn't center me as its leader or anything like that. Like, you know, it's individually based on the person that's actually following it. And so, you know, I'm not interested in being a community leader, so to speak. Although I suppose there's some people that view me that way, but that's never been the intention. It's been about just being fucking real and talking about something that is an integral part of my life. You know, the occult has been an integral part of my life since I was 14. I'm almost 40 now. You know, you're talking 26 fucking years. You know, I've been on this path. And so fucking absolutely, yeah, exactly. Right? Yeah, so it's not, you know, it's not about it's never been about being a spiritual leader or a fucking guru or anything like that. It's just like, this is what I think. These are my thoughts. You can agree, you can disagree. We can have a conversation, right? Like, I'm not going to tell anybody that they're fucking wrong. I'll tell them that I disagree. I'm not going to tell you you're wrong. And it's always been about the conversation, which is why I chose podcasting as like the platform, because that's where the conversations happen. You know, that's where we talk to each other. It's not me preaching shit to you. I mean, this is kind of like Satan and Coffee's like my fucking soapbox, right? But, you know, it's always been about the conversation. It's always been about, you know, talking to the chat, you know, answering questions and providing guidance and, you know, shit like that and bringing people on. I mean, we've had Shea Belay. We've had fucking, you know, we've had fucking Curtis. We've had fucking Thorne. We've had, look, so many fucking people have been on, you know, between Apocrypha and Satan and Coffee that it's just fucking ridiculous. Orly Stewart. You know, we had Orly Stewart on like multiple times. You know, amazing fucking people in the space. Sanctuary Satanica, we had them on Apocrypha, you know. You know, Black Witch Dyra, you know, my fucking wife has been on, right? You know, yeah, exactly. Right? You know, those conversations need to happen. And it's always been about conversation. You know, and yeah. Thank you. I love her too. Probably very differently than you do, but oh, look, there she is. So, you know, so yeah, we've had so many fucking people. I'm sure. Like, I mean, I think she's been in the game a little bit. Like, I don't know if I want to say longer than I have, but you know, probably around the same amount of time. But you know, what she's been doing is very different than what I've been doing. Interesting. I'm not even sure what the hell that is. Yes, hello. You know, the lovely thing about having a black cat is like when he comes on the desk and I start petting him, like it just kind of looks like I'm petting the air. It's like you can't see him. Like you can see his tail now, but like Anima. Anima Nora. Yeah. That was she was another one that I had on a couple of times. You know. Yeah, Anima Nora thing was I wasn't sure how to take that. And I wasn't sure how to go about it, to be honest. You got tired of meowing outside the door. Yeah, he did. He just came down here for attention, didn't you, buddy? Came down to get some lovin's. This cat fucking hated me when I first met him. Now he's just like all up in my shit. And he's gotten so fat. Like he wasn't this fat before. Didn't you, buddy? You got fat. So yeah. Looking forward to it, Sarah. Looking forward to it. You know, having you on and stuff like that. You know, we just recently started getting guests on Satan and Coffee. Satan and Coffee used to be like it's just a solo show, and then, you know, you can learn to make better moves. Chess will be the same game always. Yeah, that's true. That's true. All right. So, I think I'm going to call it right there, guys. I've been on for 2.5 hours. I didn't finish the full outline, but hopefully you guys are interested in what the Infernal Covenant is. Once I get the website, as soon as I'm done with this, I'm going to start working on the website because the website's up. It's just completely fucked as far as formatting is concerned. So it's infernalcompass.com. If you're interested in information on what it is that I'm building and making and all that fun shit, I just need to fix the images. Yeah, same, Sarah, same. Adisdade.com for my personal shit. That one's also under construction. It looks like crap right now. And any ritual services, stuff like that, Infernal Compass, you know, the free 30-minute thing is blackmagicdiary.com on there, right? So you guys are fucking amazing. Thank you for being here. And as always, kill thy fucking self. I'll see you in the next one. Peace the fuck out.